It's so much. It's somehow very amazing to me that Europe is in the middle of this mess, and they don't care about what, because when we talk about the threat of having a nuclear war between the two superpowers, Europe is in the vicinity, is right in the neighborhood,
In the
and
middle.
in the middle. And I think, and something happened, Europe going to be destroyed. I don't know if the leaders in Europe recognize that
Yeah,
the
Nima,
importance.
you don't have any Helmut Kohls. You don't have any Francois Mitterrands. You don't have any leaders like that in Europe. Merz, he doesn't. I don't think he even understands the dimensions of the problems he's gotten Germany into. Um, you have, well, let's just go back and I think it was Kohl. It might have been it might have been Merkel, but I think it was Kohl. It was earlier than Merkel, um, who one day in an off moment essentially said over the telephone, if I looked at the transcript correctly, this was a conversation with H.W. Bush, as I recall. You know, it's our land the missiles are going to land on. And he was right, especially if you were talking about the old scenario where the Russian 10th Group or the attack group that Ogarkov was in command of at the time, a very, very aggressive Soviet commander. If the group of Soviet forces, Germany, came through the Fulda Gap and we were going to nuke them, which was our plan, we were going to nuke them. The Germans said, that's our land. That's our place. You're going to nuke. And you're right. They're not thinking that way today. They're not thinking that way, which takes me back to Colin Powell's conversation in 1989 when he had listened to Gorbachev in St. Catherine's Palace and listened to Bush and Reagan and others when he was National Security Advisor. And he said, you know, we will be without these people. The Mitterrands, the Kohls, the Majors, the Thatchers, we'll be without them. Very shortly, we'll be without them. And there will be no one in Europe whose feet were in World War II. 13-year-old, 12-year-old, whatever, but their feet were in World War II. That is going to change everything. Well, it's changed it for the worse in this respect because no one over there in leadership position anyway seems to understand what they're talking about and how serious it is and how we are absolutely treatyless now. We have no restraints. There are no treaties governing nuclear weapons other than START, and Putin has said, I think rather unequivocally, he said, sorry, I'm not going to renew that in February when it goes dead with a deceitful nation like America. So we are going to be totally treatyless then. There will be no treaties, and we'll be in a nuclear arms race that says, China, build all you want. Russia, build all you want. We'll build to match them, and we'll go bang, bang, bang with trillions of dollars wasted, which none of us can afford, and the world growing more dangerous and more subject to destabilization and destruction than ever before, even worse than during the Cold War. I already think, Nima, we are already at a point right now, given the absolute inutility of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, given the aspirant powers we have in the world for nuclear weapons status, given powers like North Korea, Pakistan, and India are two more, I would say, are volatile nuclear powers. We're at a point right now that's more dangerous than any time since we invented nuclear weapons.
The propaganda, Larry, by the way, is so thick, and you look at the way that Donald Trump was somehow talking about the conflict in Ukraine, and right now, the difference is unbelievable before being elected and right now.
Yes.
And here is what Donald Trump, in my opinion, what Donald Trump and his administration are doing is what it's far worse than what the Biden administration. Considering the attack on nuclear bombers, considering the escalation, which we know the Pentagon has decided during the Biden administration not to go that far, that not to escalate that much. But it seems all those red lines are just have been crossed by the new administration, the Trump administration, and he's somehow, he's making this sort of propaganda. Here is what he said about the casualties on the part of. He was addressing the submarines going closer to Russia and addressing the casualties on the part of Ukrainians and Russians.
Before you play that, well,
go ahead.
I was just going to add, it's not just General Donahue, that made impolitic and destabilizing remarks about ground forces against Russia and Kaliningrad. I'm hearing from the Pentagon, from very reputable sources, that the planning going on right now, a la General Donahue and others like him, is really, really dangerous, because they are actually contemplating entering the war in Ukraine. Actually contemplating it. And the Brits are too, and probably the Germans and French, but not for very long, because their publics will throw them out of office if they do that. I'll make that prediction. But we are making it even worse than you're hinting at, Neiman. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Let me just.
They put out a statement, and the answer is they are in the region, yeah, where they have to be.
Can you say what Steve Witkoff's message will be to the Russians? Is there anything they can do to avoid sanctions at this point?
Yeah, get a deal where people stop getting killed. They had a number that just came out that a tremendous number of Russian soldiers are being killed. And likewise, Ukraine, a lower number, but still thousands and thousands of people. And now we're adding towns where they're being hit by missiles. So it's a lot of people being killed in that ridiculous war. And, we stopped a lot of countries from war, India and Pakistan. We stopped a lot of countries. And we're going to get that one stopped, too. Somehow we're going to get that one stopped. That's a really horrible.
Look, just listen to the lies. We didn't stop India and Pakistan. We didn't have anything to do with India and Pakistan coming to a reasonable understanding and not going any further in the conflict that seemed to be blooming. We didn't have anything to do with it. I know that for a fact. Someone needs to ask Marco Rubio what he did. And the insinuation there, very strong insinuation. I like the fact that he says he's going to end it, but he said that before and didn't. But the strong insinuation there is he swallowed the lies that Ukrainian intelligence, and I suspect CIA and Mossad and MI6 too, are telling him about casualties. That's simply a bald-faced lie to even insinuate that the Russians are taking anywhere near the casualty numbers that the Ukrainians are, either WIA or KIA. And all you have to do is look at the recent exchanges to understand that. The number of dead Russians is minuscule. The number of dead Ukrainians is huge. So I would say right now, the Ukrainians are probably, and have been for some time now, taking 16 or 17 to 1 for every Russian casualty. Now, you got to remember that the Ukrainians started out with roughly 38, 39 million in their entire country, have lost 6 or 7 million in refugees and people just leaving, have lost enormous numbers in casualties on the battlefield. Many of the wounded never going back to anything because they're seriously wounded. And the Russians still have millions, not just in citizenry in general, but also several millions in their military. They've got 1 million probably troops they could call on within the next 6 months at any time they wanted to. Trump is befuddled. He's just not served very well. He's either a bald-faced liar, which I'm sure he is on occasion, or he's getting really bad information from the people who are supposed to be serving him. And if you just watch Pete Hegseth when he's around Trump, and you see the way he sucks up to Trump, and the way every word that comes from his mouth he's looking over his shoulder to make sure his boss really liked it, and gets increasingly untrue as his boss does like it, then you got to ask yourself about the Secretary of Defense too. We know he's not a good manager. We know he's not a very knowledgeable man, certainly not in national security affairs. And we know he's a sycophant because he proves it every time he goes on to say anything, whether it's in the Congress or it's in front of his president or it's at a cabinet meeting or whatever. So what kind of advice is Trump getting? Now, here's what I hear that gives me faint hope. I'm hearing that the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, not so new now, is really a brake on this. And that as best he can, he's trying to keep Hegseth from acting the fool. And he's also trying to make sure the information gets through to the president that's genuine and actionable intelligence, if you will. That's hard. That's tough because you've got the Secretary of Defense between you and the president by law and rule. But the new chairman empowerment under the Goldwater-Nichols Act gives the chairman the right to tell the secretary he's going to see the president or communicate with the president. And the secretary has no right to tell him not to. He can say, no, you're not going. And some might. Hegseth might be one who would. But I think Kane would probably persist because the law's on his side. The latest amendment to the National Security Act, the so-called Goldwater-Nichols Act, and the ones that followed that, they give the chairman real power. So I'm hoping, I'm assuming, and I'm hearing that Kane is going around Hegseth or through him to the president and trying to get to Trump and tell him when he's making grievous errors. Now, if you know anything about Trump's personality, and I know you do just from watching him on television, that might not do any good because Trump might just turn to Hegseth and say, what do you think? And Petey's going to say what he thinks, which is uninformed, stupid, and sycophantic. So we're in trouble. The empire is in far greater trouble under Donald Trump than I ever thought it would be at this particular stage in its deterioration. I mean, it's been deteriorating ever since the end of the Cold War, but it's rapidly deteriorating now, domestically and internationally.
What's dangerous, in my opinion, is the way that they're trying to build the rhetoric, these sort of lies. And because if you remember, before Israel attacking Iran, they were talking about, Netanyahu was talking about the Iran has been destroyed and the house of cards. Just go there and just put an end to the regime change, put an end to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and which wasn't the case. But when it comes to Russia, it's unbelievable, the ignorance. He said that he said tremendous numbers, but he put it in a post and a social truth or on X. He said that Russia has lost 112,000 soldiers since January this year, and Ukrainians lost 8,000.
Preposterous. Yeah, absolutely preposterous. But someone's given him that information. I don't believe he's making this up from whole cloth. He's a liar. He's a serial liar. There's no question. But I don't think he's making this up out of his serial lying capacity. I think he's getting that information. And I think he's getting it from CIA, MI6, and Mossad through Hegseth and others. I can't believe that Kane would go along with that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff isn't going to step in and say, Mr. President, you got to quit talking about these casualty figures because you're lying. You're not intentionally lying. That's the way I'd put it. But you're lying because you've got bad data. You've got bad information. You wouldn't believe this, Nima, but we have been taking most of the information that we call actionable intelligence about the Ukraine war since the special military operation started and even before from MI6, Mossad, and CIA. And you know where they're getting their information from? Ukrainian intelligence. So you know why it's skewed and why it's badly skewed, because Ukrainian intelligence doesn't want its supporters to know how badly it's being shellacked by the Russians. Now, why we're doing that is beyond me. I mean, I saw some really, I'm the guy who went to the UN with Colin Powell. I saw some really bad tradecraft, bad intelligence work. Sorry, DCI, CIA head. I saw all of that up close and personal. But I knew that down in the bowels of the CIA, and I discovered this in spades afterwards, too late, that there were some people who objected, some real intelligence professionals. There are real intelligence professionals in the CIA today who object to what's going on. Why Tulsi Gabbard hasn't done something about it, and I know the director of CIA isn't going to do anything about it because he's an Israeli clone. He works for Bibi Netanyahu. But Tulsi has some independence that I thought would have been put to use here, and she would be contradicting some of this, and even going public with some of it to the Congress, at least, as she did with the Iran situation. But I think she's turned into a coward. I think Tulsi Gabbard has proven her true colors are yellow.
It's more than 8 months that we're talking about the people that Zelensky is trying to send to the battlefield, young people and elderly people and more than 60 years old. And Donald Trump says he doesn't know and he has no clue about it. How can we assume that he knows what's going on with the case of Ukraine?
I think we can assume that he knows nothing about what's going on in the case of Ukraine. Just the other day, he gave voice to just outlandish, assessments that the Russians suffered 20,000 dead in a month. This last month, the Ukraine's only suffered 8,000 dead since January. I mean, if those are figures that he's quoting as the president of the United States, then, either he is completely failing to comprehend what people are telling him, or people are just spoon feeding him garbage. And those numbers are Ukrainian numbers. This is the fantasy world that Ukrainian extremists who populate social media live in. And this means that the president is dealing with people who scrape social media accounts to pull together, fantasy numbers and then brief the president of the United States. This is disturbing. You've spoken to Ray McGovern on several occasions. He used to be the man who briefed it was the CIA briefer for the presidential daily brief. I was never a briefer. I know that I have been the subject of several presidential daily briefings, and I know what goes into it. The level of scrutiny that information gets before it's included in something that's briefed before the president of the United States, considered to be the most powerful person in the world, who should only have access to the most accurate, verified, fact-based information, carefully assessed information in the world, was amazing. I mean, the CIA bent over backwards to make sure that if it got into the PDB, it was good, because you don't get second chances at that level. This is the president of the United States. This president's being fed garbage. I mean, there's no, PDB. That even when they talk about the PDB, they've turned it into something like a Fox News format. I mean, so it's not, originally it's about entertaining the president. This is crap. I know Tulsi Gabbard, she's responsible for the PDB. She has a huge responsibility and overwhelming task. This president doesn't want to be briefed. How can you be briefed if you believe you know everything? I mean, this is a man who, I'm the smartest in the world about this. I know more about this than anybody. He knows nothing about anything, and he just proved it. I mean, this is the president of the United States committing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of American taxpayer money to continue to sustain a conflict that's already been lost. Pretending that he cares about human lives, but all he's doing is guaranteeing that tens of thousands of Ukrainians are going to die in a war that could be stopped right now if the president made it stop. I hope that's the message that Steve Witkoff got from Vladimir Putin, is that this war can be stopped right now. If you really care about human life, we can stop this war. Vladimir Putin made a presentation. He said, look, Ukraine, just withdraw from our territory, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, and you'll never be part of NATO. If you say that, we'll do a ceasefire right now. right now. We'll have a ceasefire. And then we'll talk. It's not going to be over at that point in time. It's just a ceasefire. But then they begin conflict termination discussions without anybody dying. That's what the president of the United States claims he wants. Hopefully, Putin turned to Witkoff and said, let me make it as clear as possible. We're advancing and we will continue to advance until we've taken back all our territory. That's not Ukrainian territory. Sorry, it never will be again. It's Mother Russia. And this is the trajectory we're on. This will happen. It's inevitable. You can't stop it. Now, if you can make the Ukrainians understand that this is going to happen, that you can't stop it, and the only thing that's going to happen is that Ukraine's going to lose another couple 100,000 dead, maybe the best thing to do is just get them the hell out of there, and tell them that they'll never be part of NATO, and then we begin talking at that point in time. And at that point in time, nobody's denying the president's achieved what he claims to achieve. I hope that's what Putin told Witkoff, and I hope Witkoff comes back and tells Trump exactly that. And I hope that Trump never listens to Steve Kellogg again, because I think that's where a lot of these fanciful numbers are coming from. And I hope that Pete Hegseth takes a lead from Trump and tells people like Christopher Donahue to shut up about Kaliningrad, and maybe start telling Whitaker, the ambassador to NATO, to tone it down. If you ever call Putin, I forget what he called you, just insulting words. If you ever do that again while I'm trying to have a negotiation to bring it into a conflict, I'll fire you, arrest you, and put you in jail for the rest of your life. I mean, what kind of idiot does it take? This man's a former prosecutor. He's supposed to have a couple, brain cells up there. What kind of idiot goes out there and badmouths President Putin at the very moment when the United States needs to encourage dialogue with President Putin? The president has surrounded himself with the worst advisors possible. Marco Rubio is horrible. Pete Hegseth is just ignorant as the day is long. There is no national security advisor anymore. Marco Rubio is dual hatting on this. Keith Kellogg is just in, Banderas la la land. The only trusted person that he has out there is Steve Witkoff. And Witkoff's job isn't to actually negotiate. His job is to be a messenger, to take President Trump's message, deliver it, and receive the message from Putin. I trust Witkoff in this capacity, and we'll see. But, we also have to remember that, Witkoff was the guy that was supposedly negotiating with the Iranians at the last minute before Israel carried out their surprise attack. So that's another problem the Russians have is, and I would have said that again, this is why I'll never be the president of anything, but I would have told Witkoff, you're here. But how do I know that, if Trump just moved 2 Ohio-class submarines closer to Russian shores? How do I know you're not here just to, soften us up for the surprise attack? We can't trust you anymore. We don't trust you. We don't believe a word you say anymore. Are you sincere? I don't know. Maybe you're sincere, but is your president sincere? These are things that have to be brought back to President Trump, and he has to be told, you have to change the way you do business, because right now the way you do business is disgraceful. It discredits the United States, and it puts us in a position where when we need diplomacy the most, we can't do it, because who's going to trust us? Nobody should ever trust us again. Not him, not this president.
It's not just about submarines. He deployed nukes to Europe, to the United Kingdom, if
I'm not worried about that. I mean, it is what it is, but we already have more than 100 of those bombs there. So what's 20 more? Who cares? It's just the stupidity of it. It's just dumb. But having a couple more B-61-12s stationed in England as opposed to stationed in the Netherlands, stationed in Italy, stationed in Belgium, stationed in Turkey, they're there already. Yeah, I'm not happy about it, but I'm not going to lose sleep over that. What I lose sleep over is the movement of the Ohio-class submarines. That's problematic. What I lose sleep over is the continued desire on the part of the United States to deploy Dark Eagle to Europe. That's a hypersonic missile. I'm not happy about that. I lose sleep over the fact that the Russians have walked away from the INF self-imposed moratorium on deploying INF systems, and now the Oreshnik is in serial production and being deployed. I don't think you're old enough to remember the SS-20 crisis of the 1970s when the Soviets brought the SS-20 out. It changed everything. NATO went from saying maybe we can do, to saying we're dead. The moment this happens, we all die because of this system that just overwhelms everything. And it led to a crisis where we deployed Pershing IIs and ground-launched cruise missiles to Europe and put us on the cusp of a, of this situation spinning out of control, killing everybody, which is why we signed the INF Treaty. Well, we're in a similar situation today because now the Oreshnik is there, and that genie's not going back in the bottle. And now we're going to deploy Dark Eagle, and we're right back to where we were in 1985, 1986. Then we had Pershing IIs ready to strike Moscow in 7 to 12 minutes of launch. The Russians had, or the Soviets had the SS-20s. We're going to blanket all of Europe, kill everything. Today, in a year, we're going to have the, Dark Eagle that, again, can hit Moscow within minutes of launch. And the Russians have Oreshnik, which can take out everything in Europe. Wow. You think we would have learned, but we didn't. So those are the things that get me. The fact that Donald Trump, like the idiot he is, went ahead and threw a couple more B-6112s into England. It's not a game changer. It doesn't alter the balance of power. Oreshnik alters the balance of power in a big way. And now we don't have a treaty vehicle to limit it. And, the New START treaty expires on February 4th of next year. And when that's gone, we don't have a treaty vehicle to limit it. We'll jump from 1,550 deployed warheads to over 4,000 to 5,000 almost overnight. The United States already has the plan. We've bragged about it. This shows how we negotiate in bad faith with the New START. We put all these warheads into storage by basically dropping the Minuteman III from 3 warheads to 1 warhead. But just months ago, they did a Minuteman test where they put 3 warheads back on a Minuteman and test launched it to prove that they can do it. So overnight, the Minuteman will go from 1 to 3 warheads. 450 of them. There's 900 more warheads out there. The Trident will go from whatever their classified low number is to whatever their classified high number is overnight. Boom. And now we're talking a couple thousand more. We'll go to 4,000 or 5,000 warheads, and then we'll just start building new systems and without any constraints. And next thing you know, we'll be up to 20,000 to 30,000 warheads deployed, and the Russians will do the same. We're right back to the height of the Cold War. We're reversing everything. So these are the things that bother me. A couple more B-61s. I mean, it shouldn't have happened. I agree with you. It shouldn't have happened. It was stupid, but that's not what I lose sleep over at night about.
But after all, it's a sign to Russians. And as Witkoff was talking with Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump signed secondary tariffs on India because of Russian oil. These are signs for Russia and the Russian government. If you're honest, if you want something substantial, if you want, as Witkoff was talking about, strategic partnership or cooperation, whatever they're looking for, these are not the signs that make you hopeful about that.
No, but this is Donald Trump we're talking about. All right. He can put them on, he can take them off. I mean, there's no, this isn't Congress passing legislation. Congress already passed legislation that gave the president the ability to do whatever the hell he wants to do. And so the president now can put these on, he can take them off anytime he wants for whatever reason he wants. I think what, in the president's warped little, art of the deal mind, I'm putting them on India to put pressure on Russia, to let the Russians know we're serious. India's already said, pound sand, we're not doing this. China's already said the same thing. Brazil, I think, has said the same thing. I think the president's waking up to the fact that nobody's going to respond to this. Nobody cares. But in his mind, he has to put pressure on, or else, Witkoff won't have any leverage when he meets with Putin. So this is what the president's doing. But this is fake. It's all fake. I feel that, if there's going to be a deal, you're going to see the president, once there's a path to a ceasefire, then the president will, do what needs to be done with, the sanctions he's put on the nations that purchase Russian oil, because you can't have a deal unless you're willing to lift all sanctions, the Russian prerequisites. Got to lift all sanctions, and those include secondary sanctions.
Isn't that amazing that we are living in the Western Hemisphere and we are talking every day? We read the mainstream media and all these discussions on the conflict in Ukraine, but we don't know what's going on in the mind of the Trump administration. You said that somehow we know what Russia wants with a settlement in Ukraine. There's
Uh,
so
It's not somehow we know. We know because Putin tells us, because he's
exactly.
honest with us.
Yeah.
And as former senior level officials at I think the World Bank said, when we sit down with Vladimir Putin for meetings, he knows everything. He's very well prepared. You can't get him on anything. He knows it all. And he doesn't need notes. He's done his research. This is who we're dealing with here. I mean, literally, I know all the Americans in the audience are going to get really mad at me for saying this. He's the best leader in the world today. There's no leader that comes close to Vladimir Putin. I wish we had an American president that had the discipline and the intellectual capacity and the integrity of a Vladimir Putin, and think about the general well-being of the people you're responsible for. I honestly believe when Vladimir Putin wakes up in the morning, his one driving force is, what can I do to make the life of the Russian people better? I believe it because you take a look at how he behaves and what he does. He acts on it. I don't think Donald Trump wakes up giving one rat's ass about the American people. He cares about Donald Trump. His administration right now is just bending over backwards to try and get him the Nobel Peace Prize. He's stopped 5 wars. You know that, right? He's stopped all 5 of them, all 5 of the wars. And the 6th one, the big one, is Russia. And he's going to stop that too. And God, if the Russians ever say, all right, we'll do the ceasefire if the Ukrainians do this, he's going to say, I've stopped all the wars in the world. I am the ultimate peacemaker. You must give me the Nobel Peace Prize. Forget the fact that I bombed Iran in violation of international law and that I worked with the Israelis to carry out a surprise attack against Iran. Forget that little fact. I mean, that's just, come on. 2 submarines moving to Russia? Not a big deal. He hasn't stopped any wars, not a single war. Every war he thinks he stopped is still festering. And if they stopped, it wasn't because of him. India and Pakistan didn't stop fighting because of Donald Trump. Cambodia and Thailand still are hooking and jabbing. The Cambodians might want to kiss his ass a little bit more and nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize, but the Thais aren't, because the Thais know the truth. There's still problems there. He talked about he sent a 3-man delegation to the Congo to try and cook up a deal between Congo and Rwanda, and they had to flee for their lives. I mean, yeah, you stopped that war, didn't you, Donnie baby? He hasn't stopped a single war. And all he does is fuel wars. He sells weapons. The he's not just a hypocrite. He's not just a liar. He's ignorant, purely ignorant. And it's all narcissist based. This is all about Donald Trump. And my God, you have a president of the United States that is going to take all this power and just focus it on making Donald Trump seem like a great guy. $60 million worth of food to Gaza, but nobody's thanked me. Nobody's thanked me at all. Why aren't you thanking me? Why aren't you making sure the food gets to the people who need it? Well, somebody should thank me. This is where we're at right now. When was the last time Vladimir Putin had to go on national TV and beg people to thank him for something? Never.
Don't you think that Donald Trump is getting so much involved with the mindset of Europeans, and in terms of the new arms, sending new arms to Europe, and the way that they're trying to somehow invest in the US economy? I don't know if they're going to be capable of doing, but they're talking about it too much. Things are happening, considering whatever they're doing, European leaders are doing, considering the United States. They want something in Ukraine. They want the policy in Ukraine to be modified the way they want the US policy to be. And don't you think that would make some sort of barriers, obstacles for Donald Trump?
No. What can Europe do? Nothing. You saw Ursula von der Leyen when she met with him. So intimidated, she had to lie. She was so intimidated by the need to be seen as making a deal that she lied about $600 billion. There's no $600 billion. Donald Trump believed the lie. Apparently, he's running around talking about how I have $600 billion, no strings. I can do whatever I want with it. I build a golf course. there's no 600 billion. She had to go out immediately and say, yeah, no, there's no $750 billion either of energy. No. 3 years, 250 billion each. No. Europe's not buying $250 billion worth of energy from the United States. Last year, Europe bought $76 billion worth of energy from the United States, and that sort of maxed out their capacity to handle it. The United States only produced $310 billion worth of exportable energy last year, and that was going to everywhere but Europe. And now you're saying the United States is going to drop all those contracts, all the contracts in Asia and elsewhere, to divert it over to Europe. They can't handle it. Even if the United States was able to flow all the liquid natural gas into Europe, there's no place to receive it. You deliquefy it, to get it into the system, long-term storage. None of it exists. So it's a made-up number, fake. But that's what Donald Trump does. He lies about everything, just made-up numbers. So right now you have the Europeans just going out there and just making stuff up. But it's not real. It doesn't change anything. Ukraine's screwed 6 ways from Sunday. I mean, you can sit here. People, just stop believing anything that comes out of Europe. Stop. It's all a lie. They even, this whole, what do they call it? Pearl, P-E-R-L or P-U-R-L or something. I don't know, this new Department of Defense thing. Basically, it's the scam of scam of scams. Hey, Europe, you already bought something from us? Give it to Ukrainians and then buy the replacement from us. So you're paying for the same thing twice. That's what it is. I mean, that's the scam. Nima, you just bought a car. Okay, I want you to give the car away to your uncle and go out and buy a new car. You pay. Your uncle wants a car. Give him your car. Go out and buy a new car. You pay. And that new car is going to be on standby in case your uncle wants it again. Is this a good deal for you, Nima? But that's the deal that we gave all of Europe. That's it. And the Europeans went, oh yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. Europe's got nothing. There's got, in order for Europe to have something, they have to have leverage over us. They have to be able to pick up the phone and say, we need you to do something right now, Uncle Sam. That's not how this works. Daddy talks, the little babies listen. That's it. That's the relationship. Daddy, baby, daddy, baby. And I hate to say that, except Mark Rutte thinks that Donald Trump is NATO's daddy. And Donald Trump's more than happy to, I think he even printed up a shirt. It says daddy and got his picture on it. This is where we're at. So there's just no obstacles coming out of Europe. Europe's got nothing. Nothing. It's embarrassing. You saw the humiliation of Keir Starmer and his wife coming to the castle, going to the king, the American king. This is just stupidity in the extreme. Paul, I wish there was something more intellectually sound that I could say about this, but what do you say about people debasing themselves? The Europeans are nothing. They've got nothing. Tell me one thing the Europeans have. One, just name it. See, yep, Europe can deliver the following. Nothing.
Yeah. I would argue the only thing that they have is the hatred towards Russia, and nobody knows the reason of that.
They don't even have that, though. You can't say Europeans. That's the European. 16% of the Germans would fight for their country today. 16%. Tell you what, if America ever gets to the point where 16% say, yeah, we'll fight for our country, it's time to wrap it up, cash it in. I mean, if you're a male of fighting age and you call yourself an American, doesn't mean you have to join the military right now. But if somebody invades your country, you have to be ready to go to war right now, drop everything and go to war and give your life. That's what being an American is all about. That's what being a citizen of anything. I would imagine, you live in Brazil. Are you a Brazilian? I mean, I don't mean to get personal here, but do you have Brazilian citizenship?
No. Yeah,
all right. So if Brazil was invaded, Argentina comes across the border. They're coming in, and they say every man capable of holding a weapon has to come to the defense of Brazil. I think you'd find a way to do it, because that's what you do in the country you live in that they call yours. The Germans, you have Merz pretending he's the Fourth Reich. 16% of the Germans say, yeah, we'll fight for this. I bet you that's a high percentage throughout Europe. I've had this conversation with people before. The European Union destroyed Europe in so many ways. But one of the main ways they destroyed Europe is that Europe stopped being real, because the European Union's fake. There's no such thing as European citizenship or a European identity. There's not. But what they did is they created this fake identity, and people forgot who they were. They forgot that they were French. They forgot that they were German. Thank God the Italians got Maloney. So the Italians at least know that they're Italians. But that's probably more due to the mafia than anything else. At least the mafia is proud of being Italian. But, all these nations, the Portuguese, they just run all over Europe trying to get jobs. They're not going to fight and die for Portugal. In Spain, you got the Catalonians will fight and die for Catalonia. But, Spanish people going to fight. And nobody's going to die for Europe. Nobody's going to die for Europe. I mean, so this is just stupid. But in Russia, Russian men are volunteering to go to special military operation to get this thing done. They're volunteering by the tens of thousands every month. And if you invade Russia, as Germany and NATO are saying they might have to do, it's all over. Every man comes out of the woodwork, and that's it. You have to kill every Russian, and you're not going to kill every Russian. History has shown that when you piss the Russians off, they end up taking your capital city. Ask the French, ask the Germans.